Welcome back, football fans, to Double Take, an NFL podcast streaming everywhere you get podcasts and also on our YouTube channel. I'm your host, David, joined by my co-host and my twin brother, Daniel. How are you, man?
Bro, I feel amazing. I feel so great. You know,
Do you?
I'm excited to get into exactly why, but I'm great.
Yeah, so we had talked off the show. Savage can't be here today, or he might hop on later on. But like right now, where we're at is free agency. Days 1 and 2 already went by. We're recording this on Wednesday. I'm going to keep my eyes on while we're recording, just in case some news happens while we're on the air. But we said that we weren't going to talk about the Cowboys, but
We said that.
people want us to. We're Cowboys fans. And so we have to talk about them. But last 2 days haven't had, there really has been, in terms of football, has been little to talk about in terms of the Dallas Cowboys. But Daniel, give me your thoughts. How do you think the Cowboys have done so far in this free agency period, or I would even say the offseason?
They've done terrible. They've been awful. And not because of the fact that they've done nothing. It's the fact that they said they were all in and they've done nothing. They've re-signed 2 players that I had no idea were even on the roster at all. And then also missed out on a bunch of players that could have helped this team. And on top of that, one of the key points of being all in was extending Dak Prescott. That was one of the key points of being all in. Because you can't extend Micah and CD without extending Dak. That just stops your whole train altogether. And for me, Jerry knows I know exactly what Jerry is doing. And David, you know where I'm going with this.
Mm-hmm.
This is set up to me for Jerry to shift the whole blame on this season to Dak Prescott. This is exactly what it is. Because you know what Jerry's going to say. Well, you know, when your quarterback is eating 59% of your cap, it's hard to do anything. So we couldn't go get the players that we wanted. We wanted Dak to take this kind of contract. He didn't want it, so it put us in a bind. So we can't get the players that we want. We can't go after anybody. We can't afford anybody. That's exactly what he's going to do. And because I know how Cowboys fans are, that's exactly what they're going to say as well, especially the Dak haters. They're going to look at this whole situation and be like, what is Jerry supposed to do? They have no money to play around with. Dak is taking too much of money, this and this and that. I know exactly what's happening. And I feel like I'm in the best place where a fan about Dak Prescott is supposed to be. Because, David, you know, over the past 2 or 3 years, I've been where Savage is with Dak right now. That's where I was with Dak 2 to 3 years ago. So I think a lot of what people are saying about Dak, how they feel about Dak, is kind of where they're in their hater phase right now, the emotional phase. They look at all the playoff woes and failures, and they cling on to that. I've overcome that. I'm over that by now. So I'm able to talk about Dak Prescott in a way where I know what his past is. I've gotten over the hurt, all those things. So I feel like I'm one of the best people to talk about Dak Prescott. That is a huge mistake, not extending Dak Prescott. And we've talked about this. We know the reasons why. The reasons why I'm so upset about the Cowboys not extending Dak is because you don't even have a backup plan post Dak. Or if people are saying, hey, get rid of Dak, no one can give me a straight answer on where we go after this. And yes, it is hard to get players with a cap hit like Dak has. But that doesn't stop other teams from restructuring a 1-year contract to where his money can be made in a signing bonus to where he doesn't have a huge cap hit. They're not even willing to do that. And I know people are going to blame Dak for that. So for me, it's not surprising. It's not surprising that they don't do anything because they haven't done anything in a couple years. Unless we're talking about last year where they traded for Stephon Gilmore, they traded for Brandon Cooks. I don't see the Cowboys making any of those types of moves. If they do, it would be shocking to me and surprising. But this is who Jerry Jones is at the end of the day. He's not going to do anything to improve the team. The biggest win for him is that people are talking about it. You don't think Jerry felt good being on his vacation with his family and all on the timeline is 31 teams made moves today. Guess what? One team that didn't. Any publicity is good publicity for Jerry Jones. It just is. And so for me, it is what it is. I know exactly what Jerry is doing, and I know exactly what everyone is going to have to say about this season if it is a failure. I already know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you said there that I absolutely agree with. It seems like things are being set up again to blame Dak for this upcoming
Mm-hmm.
season. Um, because you could have had money to go and get somebody because they're only $2.2 million under the salary cap. You extend Dak,
Mm-hmm.
you open up $21 million. And you make a couple more, we can have as much as $38 to $40 million under the salary cap to go and to get guys and to make moves. And you lose Tony Pollard to Tennessee. You lose pretty much everybody else to Washington. And so you're looking at this football team, and yes, you have Dak Prescott, an all-pro and MVP candidate. You have CeeDee Lamb, who's an all-pro. Jake Ferguson, a Pro Bowler. You still have Zach Martin on the team. That's just the offense. Defense, you have DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Gilmore, Deron Bland. Like, no linebackers. Like, this team
Well,
is
Stephon Gilmore is a free agent, so he
he's
could
a
go
free
somewhere.
agent, right? So, I mean, you're looking at this team and you saw that Washington got better. Philly got better. Giants got better. Everyone got better but Dallas. So I'm kind of at the point right now where I'm saying, like, man, Dallas is probably the third best team in the NFC East. Like, roster wise, we're the third best team because we have no running game. We have two options to throw to. Your defense is decimated because Dan Quinn, I think he sold the game against Green Bay and then stole all those players to go to Washington. Like, I truly, like, and usually I'm not that type of person who thinks that, but I think Dan Quinn just completely sold against Green Bay, put them in their worst scheme ever, got them blown out, and then went to Washington and said, hey, listen, this is my loyalty to you. I sabotaged the Dallas Cowboys in their last playoff game to show you that I mean business. Because he took all those guys with him to Washington.
And I mean, he took what? 2 guys?
He took Biotish.
It wasn't a plethora, right?
It was a plethora. He took Biotish, Armstrong, Dante Fowler, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And then a couple of other guys, but I can't really remember where their names off the top of my head because I don't want to get them wrong. But he took a good amount of players and a good amount of coaches with him. So you're looking at this Dallas roster and you said, listen, Deuce Vaughn is our only running back on our roster right now. Vander Esch is still on the team. He's probably our only linebacker other than Overshown, who we're hoping comes back and makes a full recovery because he looks pretty good. It looked really good in the preseason. But there's just so many glaring holes of things that you could have done to address in free agency. And it's not even and I'm going to play this clip real quick of Dave Hellman talking about what the Cowboys do or the lack of what they're doing and how that affects our football team and what the ability for us to do in free agency. Let's go ahead and let's take a listen.
Talk to you Cowboys fans right now, to the nation. How should they feel?
Yeah, upset, confused, however you want to classify it. I mean, the team's won 36 games over the last 3 years. It's more than anybody but the Kansas City Chiefs. Nothing to show for it in the playoffs. 1-3. Where are they as a team? What are they doing? They have a franchise quarterback. They don't want to extend him. They have two of the best pieces in Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb. There's no movement on when those deals get done. They could create cap space. They don't want to. The report Monday night, is that they were uncomfortable going in on Zach Moss, who was Jonathan Taylor's backup running back. Good player, backup running back in Indianapolis. They're not comfortable pursuing a player of that caliber. That's like me saying, I'm not comfortable buying off the dollar menu. What are we doing here? And I'm not saying you got to splash all that cash. Nobody wants the Cowboys to do that. They have to be willing to do something. They've been doing it this way for a decade, and it's gotten them effectively nowhere. Cool, 36 wins in the regular season over the last 3 years. This ain't Carolina. This ain't one of those franchises where that's good enough. They're supposed to be pushing for more than that, and they can say everything they want, but it seems like complacency year after year, and I don't know how you can expect more than what we've seen, which is not good.
So the biggest move that the Cowboys has made, or the biggest noise coming out of Dallas so far in the last 2 days of free agency, has been Dak Prescott's extortion case in the media. That's the biggest story so far coming out of free agency. You've done nothing. You've signed nobody. Mm-hmm. You didn't extend Dak. You haven't moved on CeeDee Lamb or Micah Parsons. You only have $2.2 million under the salary cap. And Jerry Jones said months ago he's all in. Now, there's different thoughts on what Jerry meant by all in. Shannon Sharp believes that all in means that he's all in re-signing Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons. Well, he hasn't done it yet. Some people think all in could possibly mean all in on getting the number 1 overall pick in 2025. Here's the problem. We just saw an Atlanta Falcons give Kirk Cousins $45 million a year. Kirk Cousins, who in the regular season has not won more games than Dak Prescott. In the postseason has not won more games than Dak Prescott. Hasn't even made it to the playoffs as many times as Dak Prescott has never been an MVP candidate, has never been an All-Pro. And here we are again at Dak Prescott's contract and be like, yeah, you know what? He deserves to get $40 million. Or people are even saying he doesn't even deserve $40 million, which I'm not necessarily knocking them on because of his playoff success. But if a quarterback like Kirk Cousins can get $45 million per season in his 13th year in the NFL, Dak is heading into year 9. He's got a lot of football left. And so when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys and what they're doing, like if your plan is to go all in the number 1 overall pick, why don't you just take the cap hit and let Dak go? Let him go. What's the point in keeping Dak Prescott here if you don't put a team around him? You're going to say you're the reason why and then kick him out the door next year. Now, Dak might not want to do that because he wants to try and win in Dallas. For whatever reason, he wants to stay here. What are you going to do? And so I think where I'm at in terms of the Dallas Cowboys is it seems like we don't know what we're doing.
No.
Or maybe we do know what we're doing.
I think what Jerry's going to try to do is he's going to hope and pray for the draft and try to get a left tackle, a center, a linebacker, some interior linemen, and just go for it. Honestly, I think that's what he's going to do. And when the season isn't a success, he'll know who to blame. That's what's going to happen. Now I think Dak can get us to second place in the NFC East. I do think that. I still think he's a good enough quarterback. He still has CD. He still has Jake Ferguson. He still has Brandon Cooks. If we move Tyler Smith to offensive line to the left tackle position, he'll play good enough to, for that to be solid for him. The Zach Moss thing for me was crazy because you're talking about Zach Moss, a guy when Jonathan Taylor was holding out, led the league in rushing. Led the league in rushing when Jonathan Taylor was holding out.
And it was only $4 million he was asking for per year.
And $4.5 million was all that it took to sign him. And we couldn't even do that. Now, I like Deuce Vaughn. I do like Deuce Vaughn. But he can't be the only one. You got to get someone with size. And I understand not going after Derrick Henry. I would have loved to get Aaron Jones because he does a great job carving up our defense. So I wanted to see what he could do in a Cowboys uniform. But, I knew that wasn't going to happen. And so, yeah, I mean, Cowboys fans are going ballistic. And, you posed a question last week to us off the air of like, have you ever seen the Cowboys nation more divided than it is right now? No, I've never seen them more depressed. I've never seen them more confused and angry. I've never seen this before. And maybe it's because of our youth. And I mean, we'll probably have to ask people if you were alive in the 70s or 80s. Did it ever get to this point? Was it ever this bad? To where people are just divided as a fandom. I've never seen it. But it is what it is. I mean, I told you and Savage, like, towards the end of last season where I was super heavily down on the Cowboys, and you guys said, it's a new year, it's different, the past doesn't matter. And I love that I was right about that because the Cowboys are who they are, who they've been since 1996, and they won't change until, I wouldn't even say when Jerry Jones is gone. I think even Steven has a little bit of that as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are saying that it's Steven Jones who's making all these decisions, that Jerry is the talking head, but Steven is making a lot of these decisions. So, I mean, it's the Jones family. And I saw a tweet earlier. Remember, I don't know if I said this ever on air. Probably not, because this happened like after the season was over. But there was word that Jimmy Johnson was on the advisory committee for the Cowboys. Doesn't seem like it. Unless Jimmy is saying, like, hey, it's working. I mean, let's start over.
Yeah, unless it's more of a on the field type thing, like on field advisor rather than a roster team position. But I don't know. I don't think that's really doing much of anything.
Yeah. And so
which I never thought that it was going to do much of anything.
Right. I think in terms of like Cowboys, where we're at, I think it's just, I think they're going to blow this up. I think this year is going to be a wash. I like the way that the team is currently constructed right now. We're not making the playoffs. We're not winning the division, and we're not making the playoffs. Dak is going to get blamed for it. He's going to get released after the season, or he's going to walk after the season. He's going to end up going somewhere else. My take is like, why wait? Like if your thought process is to let Dak go at the end of this
Mhm.
season, why don't you just do it now?
Yeah.
Just do it right now.
Mhm.
Or at the very least, why didn't you do this earlier so that Dak could have had a fair shot to go somewhere? Because really, all the good places to go are gone.
I mean, yeah, they're
Like,
even talking about where Justin Fields could go if he could go anywhere right now. Like he's having a hard time
and
finding a landing spot.
yeah, because I think Dak could have done well in Pittsburgh. Because let's go ahead and let's shift gears over to free agency. And the biggest news, I think Pittsburgh has had a really good um, free agency. They got Russell Wilson, who they got on a 1-year deal because Denver's still paying them $38 million to not be on their team. So Steelers got Russell Wilson for $1 million. They also signed Patrick Queen onto that football team. But Daniel, talk to me. Who do you think is the biggest winner so far in free agency?
Man, I mean that is an interesting question because I like what a lot of teams have done to this point. I think they did get better. I mean, they did lose Deontay Johnson. They traded him away, but I think Russell Wilson provides more stability at the quarterback position than what they've had previously. And I think adding Patrick Queen to already a pretty good defense to where people thought, hey, this is a good Pittsburgh team, but they can grow in a lot of other areas other than the quarterback position to make themselves contenders in a division that they're on in a conference that they're in. And adding Patrick Queen, taking them away from the Baltimore Ravens and adding them to their team is great. And I think they already have a really good foundation as a team, plus the stability in Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith. From what I've heard, the system that he runs as an offense it's more comparable to an offense that Russell ran in Seattle, to where they run the football a whole lot, they set up the pass very well. So I would say right now, and not having any of the other teams in front of me, I think they've done a really good job. I think Washington has done a really good job building depth. Again, grabbing some players from the Dallas Cowboys. Tyler Biadasz, he had a down year last year, but he's proven that he can be a pretty good center. Dorrance Armstrong, and a defense that Dan Quinn likes to run, which is more of a rotational front. And where as a rotational player, he recorded 8.5 sacks last year. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Also adding Levu, who's a linebacker from Carolina. He's a really good linebacker. So for me, I think Washington has done a great job. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think it's interesting because I understand what they were trying to do with Saquon Barkley. Do I think that they probably could have spent that money elsewhere? Yes, I do. They got Gardner Johnson back, which I think is good for them. He didn't eat up a whole lot of money just because of that year that he had with the Lions, which he played pretty well. But I think, I mean, there's a reason why they let him go in Detroit. But they signed some offensive linemen to kind of help build that depth. Jason Kelsey was a huge loss, but adding some defensive pieces and what they needed, some defensive pieces. So I mean, but I still think I rather I rather have the be a Steelers fan right now because of what they've acquired. So I mean, it's been a good free agent period.
Yeah. It's been crazy. I think Houston also needs to be mentioned when we talk about people who made big moves during
Oh
this
yeah,
free agency
yeah.
period. I
Totally
mean,
forgot about them.
they've re-signed a whole bunch of guys. They got Dalton Schultz to 3 years, $36 million, which is the same deal that Dallas offered him last year. But I would say Dalton Schultz is in a better position with Houston than he is in Dallas. You trade for Joe Mixon, a surefire top
Mhm.
10 running back in the NFL. You get a defensive player to the caliber of Daniel Hunter from Minnesota, who's a beast. You give him 2
Mhm.
years, $49 million. Like, he has to be productive to justify that huge contract that you gave him. But if he steps up and he performs, which I know he will under D'Amico Ryans, like, Houston is loading their team. They said, hey, we have our quarterback. We have him on a rookie deal. We're going to take advantage of it and sign as many guys as we possibly can
Yeah.
to help this team
Yeah.
win now, because we were just in the divisional round last year. So, I mean, they are gearing
Mhm.
up, getting ready to make a big push because CJ Stroud is, like we said, a top 5 quarterback on his rookie deal. And they said, you know what? Let's go all in. And so Houston has been really, really the big team. In terms of Washington, you look at all the guys they got, all the guys from Dallas, but then you also get a guy like Austin Eckler. He had a down year in with the Chargers, but the Chargers haven't been very, very good. So I expect that to be elevated. Um, you know that they're going to get a top quarterback in this year's draft, and
They're gonna take
you have
quarterback,
that
yeah.
defense. I mean, they were already pretty decent, I would say, under Ron Rivera, and they're going to be very good next year. But let's go ahead and let's talk about running backs real quick, because we had 3 running backs
Yep.
on the move, like you said. We had, or 4 running backs. Josh Jacobs goes to the Packers. Aaron
Green
Jones
Bay.
goes to the Vikings. Saquon goes to the Eagles, and DeAndre Swift goes to Chicago. And you have to, and I guess I'll add Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard goes to Tennessee. Daniel,
And Derrick Henry.
which running back do you think is the best fit for their team?
I want to say the one I'm most excited for, and I think will really help their team, is Saquon. And you look at what he's done in a poorish offensive line that is the New York Giants for the past 6 years of his career, and he's still being able to perform under those circumstances. Now, I think the biggest question is, how's their offensive line going to play without Jason Kelce? That is the biggest question. But I do think that they still have good enough pieces on that offensive line to where at least it's still going to be better than what he had in New York. So for me, I think what Kellen Moore and this offense is going to try to do is they're going to run the football, because as much as we didn't like Kellen Moore as a Cowboys OC, he still ran the ball a lot more than what Mike McCarthy tried to do this year.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that with Jalen Hurts, Saquon, there's more of a fear level there if you're a running defense. And I think he's the most talented out of all these backs. I think the move that was most confusing for me was Josh Jacobs rather than Aaron Jones. And I understand Aaron Jones had an injury issue last year. But from what reports are saying, Aaron Jones only wanted $1 million more. And if that's the difference between him and Josh Jacobs, I'd rather have Aaron Jones. But that's just me. Maybe I'm being a prisoner of what he's done to the Cowboys and how he just goes off in the postseason. But for me, I think that was the most confusing move. But I think Saquon is poised to have a really great year. And, I'm willing to be wrong about that. But for me, that's what has me most excited out of these signings for running backs.
Yeah, my thing with Saquon, I mean, I think the most interesting for sure is going to be Saquon because he was putting up the numbers that he was and having success, as much as success as he possibly could, with a quarterback like Daniel Jones and an offensive line like the New York Giants. And I would still say he did
Mhm.
fairly well, as good as he could have done. Now you're going to a team like Philadelphia, who, yes, you lost Travis Kelce, or Jason Kelce, and that's going to be a huge loss for them. But if I trust anybody to fill that role with another good player, it would be Howie Roseman. You have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, who wasn't in our top 10, but that doesn't
No.
mean that he's still not a great quarterback still, or a good quarterback. But really now I think that's the move that I'm just like, why would you move off of DeAndre Swift? And him going to Chicago is going to be huge for
Yeah.
me, because
Mhm.
I think Philadelphia's problem last year was they in big moments and big games, they were taking the ball out of Swift's hands. And
Mhm.
Swift was a
Yeah, we talked
difference
about it,
maker for
even with
them.
Steven. Yeah.
And so that's like you said, Kellen Moore is bringing in a new system and running the football more. Swift could have gotten you the job done too.
Yeah, he could have. Yeah, he
Like
could have.
Like, it wasn't that Swift wasn't making the most out of the opportunities that he had. It's just like, hey, listen, he was making the most of it, but you weren't giving him a lot of opportunities. And
Mhm.
so I think that DeAndre Swift in Chicago, man, that's gonna be a great thing for Caleb Williams to have a strong back to be able to take the pressure off of you, so to speak, to give you an opportunity. I mean, and he can catch the ball too. I think what people love to say about Saquon is, man, you can line him up out wide and he'll
Mhm.
be just as destructive as running the football. And I think that's absolutely true. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works for Philadelphia. I think Austin Eckler going
Yeah.
to Washington is going to be an interesting move as well, depending on the quarterback that they get. Because Austin Eckler also out of
Yeah.
the backfield catching the ball. It's great. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, 4 years, $180 million, 100 of it guaranteed, making $45 million a year. Dan, do you like this move of Kirk Cousins to Atlanta?
I do, because I think for what they have on that team, they had a pretty good offensive line. Drake London's there. With Bijan Robinson, played pretty well last year. Their defense is top 10. They have all the makings of a really good team. The system that they're running is very comparable to the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan system, which Kurt thrives in. With Kevin O'Connell as his head coach, Kirk Cousins has been great. I mean, you look at the year before, maybe I'm misremembering it wrong, but they won a playoff game. They won a playoff game off a game-winning touchdown by Kirk Cousins, right, against the Saints? Is that a different
No.
year?
No. They
No?
did, but he wasn't even the quarterback. That was Case Keenum. And that was before Kevin McConnell.
Okay, then I'm misremembering that then.
Yeah,
But
no, the only
he
playoff
when
game
he got
that Kirk Cousins had, it was the one last year, and his numbers don't look bad. He was 31 of 39,
That's right.
287,
Now
2
I'm
touchdowns, no
remembering.
interceptions, and ran in a touchdown.
That's
But
right.
that was the
Now I'm
game to where
remembering it right.
his defense sold.
Mm. I'm thinking about. Anyway, but I think he's gonna be good in the system. I think he's what they need right now. They had the money to go and get him. He can deliver more than Desmond Ritter, and in a division that's really lackluster, to say the least.
Yeah.
I think Kurt's is gonna thrive there. And so for me, I personally like it. Would I have given him 4 years? No, because he's gonna be almost 40 by the time he sees the end of that contract. And
Mhm.
who knows what he's gonna be at that time. But for me, I like the signing.
Yeah. In the same division as Baker Mayfield, who just got 3 years and $100 million. I think was the deal.
Mhm.
I could be remembering that wrong, but I think it was 3 years, $100 million. What do you think about that signing to for Tampa Bay to keep Baker Mayfield?
I know. I love the move. I think Baker proved that he deserved an extension. He proved that he deserved another shot, and I think this team was probably the best team for him to stick with.
Absolutely.
I think him going somewhere else, that's another dice roll that I think at this point of his career, Baker's not comfortable in doing right now. I think he likes
Mhm.
where he's at. He likes the system and the team around him. For me, it was like no brainer. And Tampa Bay, I applaud them for doing so, because now you have steady quarterback play for the next couple of years. And what did he end up getting like annually? Was it 35? Was it 40?
Yeah,
What
it was
was it?
like $35 million.
So you still have the freedom to go and I mean, I don't know their cap situation, but I feel like they have the opportunity to go and get more pieces for Baker, whether it's a better offensive line. Let's get him a running game. How about that? Let's get someone who can run the football. Let's build an offensive line that can run block. And because I think weren't they like the worst team running the football in the past 2 seasons? So I
Yeah, they're
think
pretty
that's what
low.
they
Yeah.
need to help Baker.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so for me, like, I think if you do that, you can help Baker a whole lot. I mean, for him to be able to take you to the playoffs and win a playoff game with no running game whatsoever, it's pretty great. And so I think and for his contract, what he's getting paid, they have the opportunity to improve the team to where they can have a better shot of competing. I think it's going to be an division race between the Falcons and Tampa Bay, but they should feel very good. They should feel very good about signing Baker. He's kind of really revitalized his career, which I'm happy for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we said, he's making like 33 million a year to
Mhm,
be their quarterback, and considering what they had last year, the lack of a ground game, it's a pretty good signing. And I was talking with one of my buddies yesterday when I told him about the contract, and he said, "Man, it's hard to consider and think about that when really like he's done this before to where he's had one really good year, and then the next year he kind of falls off. I mean, due to injury, but still, it's kind of like the same thing. I don't know how they could have done it any different. Realistically, either you extend him or you let him go. And I think they
yeah,
rolled the dice and said, "Hey, listen, we need a better team. We have a
mhm.
pretty good quarterback. Let's keep him and put some pieces around him." So I do like the move. I think Minnesota uh, whiffed. I think because they got
No,
Sam Darnold to
yeah, I
replace
agree.
Kirk Cousins. Um, not a very great move, but
Mm-mm,
and like you said, we were talking about Russell Wilson earlier. Like if he plays how he played last season, not 2 years ago, but even last season,
mhm.
Pittsburgh's a pretty good football team. And last time we saw Russell Wilson on a team with a very good defense, they were making deep runs into the playoffs.
Yeah,
So I think that was a great, and again, only $1 million you're paying.
yeah.
So
Why not
one of
do it?
these episodes we'll have uh, someone who's a Denver Broncos fan come in, talk to us about how they feel. I mean, 85 million against the cap to let go of Russell Wilson. I mean, that's going to be spread out over 2 years, but you're taking a huge cap hit for him not to be on your football team. So that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy to me to consider and to think about. Um, but Daniel, any other big news that you want to talk about before we sign off? This is a quick, short episode, but
I mean, I don't not that I know of. I think once we get closer, once more of these dominoes fall, I think that Dallas is going to continue to not do anything. Yeah, I'm just looking at all these guys that everyone else is getting. I mean, even Jameis Winston got signed. He's going to Cleveland. And so, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Deshaun Watson, but I'd rather have Jameis Winston than Deshaun Watson. I don't know how much of a hot take that is, but
it's pretty hot. Well, maybe not. Maybe
I mean,
not.
I don't know, because I don't know what Deshaun Watson is at this point. What is he? It looks like he's just a shell of himself. I don't know if he has a good year of football left in him. I think taking that year off was terrible for him, and it kind of wrecked him. So no, I think that's pretty much it. I think we've hit the nail on the head about the Cowboys thing, which most people wanted us to talk about, how we were feeling. I called it. I'm not surprised by it. I'm not as low as what other Cowboys fans, because I've just accepted it at this point. After what happened to the Cowboys with the Bills game, I said I would never be excited about this football team until they prove me wrong. I think they have their franchise quarterback. That people seem to want to focus on him rather than the fraudulent Micah Parsons in that defense. Can't believe there was someone in Savage's comments wanting us to talk about Micah Parsons like he's this guy, and he's the complete opposite. But I don't want to make this a Micah Parsons diatribe, because I feel like I've already done that before, and there's nothing more that needs to be said about Micah Parsons on this show until he proves something in November, December, January. The thing that I can say about Dak Prescott, he shows up in November and December. If he doesn't show up in January, fine, whatever. But Micah doesn't even show up in November, December. So that's all that needs to be said about him on the show.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say about Dak Prescott, everybody knows I'm the biggest Dak Prescott fan. He's my favorite player. I think what needs to be said is that no one is letting Dak Prescott off the hook for his playoff performances. We know what he hasn't done.
I was his biggest critic the last two playoff games.
Right.
But here's something that I do know. You can't overcome a 48-point defense. You can't.
Well, really 41, because the pick six was on Dak.
Well, fine. But you can't overcome a defense that couldn't stop a nosebleed. Those were the excuses we were making for Aaron Rodgers. Right? For years.
Yeah.
Before these last couple of years, the last years that he had in Green Bay. Everyone's like, well, what can everyone's defending Aaron Rodgers. What can Aaron Rodgers do when his team lets up 48 or 51 or 35 or 38? But the one year that the defense does not show up, we're not even going to put any blame on. We're going to put more on the quarterback than the defense. To me, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense to me. And I'm as hard on Dak as anybody, but even I can't do that. Not if I'm going to be objective,
right,
or emotional, because I feel like that's where a lot of it is stemming from. People are emotional, are emotional about the loss, and Dak is the easiest horse to kick, because people want to fall in love with Micah Parsons. They want to fall in love with this defense so much that they're just going to use anybody not anybody, but they're going to use Dak Prescott as a scapegoat, even though eventually he did figure it out and the defense could not. All I know is one guy was able to figure something out. It wasn't like it was 48-7. Eventually,
it was 48-16 heading into the fourth quarter.
It was. But he was playing a lot better than he had in the first half. He was. And yeah, so I mean, that's all I have to say about that. But Cowboys fans, enjoy it. Enjoy the season. I'm going to enjoy the season a whole lot. Unless you guys want to do the right thing and let that man walk, let him go to an actual contender, and let's be 0-17 this year.
Yeah, my thing is, if you weren't going to get anyone in free agency, if that wasn't the move, you were just going to go through the draft and get guys, like, let Dak walk, or at least put him up to trade. You could have gotten some draft picks for him, got rid of that contract, put in Trey Lance, see what you can get, tank this year, get the number 1 overall pick, get Shador Sanders. Like, if you knew that Dak wasn't going to be your guy, you should have made moves to set yourselves up for 2025.
My thing is that I hate tanking. I hate the idea of tanking.
I get it. I'm with you.
I'd rather be competitive. I'd rather win 12 games a year and fail in the playoffs than go 0-7, then miss the playoffs, have a miserable season, and whiff on a quarterback in the draft.
I was going to say, I was like, but because what a lot of people are banking on is, like, you get the number 1 overall pick next year, you get Shador Sanders out of Colorado, and he's pretty good.
I don't watch college football, so I have no idea how good he is. I have no idea.
He's pretty good, man.
All right, if you say so. There's a lot of quarterbacks in college that were pretty good.
And this might be a hot take, but I prefer Shador Sanders over Caleb Williams.
That might be a hot take. But then again, a lot of people aren't really high on Caleb Williams. Well, a lot of people are, but there's some detractors for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm just saying, like, if you're saying Dak's not your guy because you haven't extended him yet, and you're like, this is his last year to get it done, just let him go.
Yeah, and I don't think we're advocating for, like, Dak's the guy Dak's gonna win us a Super Bowl. Maybe not. Maybe he's not. But who are you going to get?
Well, and I think the biggest
and why and again, I think, David, you've said this a couple of times, and so I think we're like, why keep him? If you don't believe in this guy so much, if he's this terrible of a quarterback that can't do anything, why keep him? There's no reason why you should keep him. Do what Denver did. Take the cap hit.
Spread it over 2 years, like they are.
2 years, like, why not do that? Everyone hates him. But no one can give me a reason why. Why is he still on this team if you don't want him that bad?
Well, people will give you an answer. You just won't like it. Their reason is just because Jerry's stupid. Like, that's.
But they don't like him either.
That.
They don't like him either.
But they probably would like Jerry more if he let go of Dak. Oh. Like that. Like, to me, that's the thing. Like, people are more than okay with tanking and being bad because they think that after a year or 2 or maybe 3 years of being bad, that we can find a quarterback who can take us where we need to go.
Well, here's a way to guarantee that you won't be that good. Trade Dak, trade Micah, trade CD, trade Trayvon, trade Zach Martin, trade everybody, clean house. Get rid of all the bad contracts that you want. Let's have over $150 million in salary cap space, and let's start over. Let's do that. But you're going to have a lot of bad contracts. And you're not. And here's the thing: you're not even having opportunities to extend the players that you have because you won't extend this guy, or at least make a decision on him.
Yeah,
but
yeah, And my big thing is that everyone's talking about Dak's contract, how it's been a problem, like this and this and that, but it's only been a problem this year. Every other year, Dak has moved money backwards,
Yeah, his cap hit,
allowing the
what was it
Cowboys to
last
have an
year, 25?
opportunity to make moves. And the Cowboys haven't done anything. The front office hasn't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy who was on TikTok earlier that I was listening to, and he was talking about, he's just like, Jerry Jones gave Dak Prescott Tyron Smith and Zach Martin, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, like Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland, like all these guys. And my thought process was like, that Jerry drafted all those guys. Kudos to him. He drafted all those guys, but none of the guys that he mentioned were any signings. And teams that win, especially teams that have won recently, have signed big guys. And the ones who haven't signed big guys, like let's say Kansas City, they drafted all that, and also they happen to have one of the greatest coaches of all time and the greatest quarterback of all time. So when we're talking about like Dak Prescott as the quarterback, no one is saying that alone Dak Prescott can lead this team to a Super Bowl. But let's also not kid ourselves and pretend like Dak truly has had every single person that he needs to go get it done. And here's where I'm bringing that into play. I was listening to an episode that we did a couple weeks ago. It was after Brock Purdy in the NFC Championship game, and you were talking about the poise of like the mental state of Brock Purdy, right? To be able to play bad in the first half and to completely turn it around and get the job done. Did you know that in 2016, as a rookie, Dak Prescott was down against the Green Bay Packers, came storming all the way back into that game to tie it up, and then the defense, who wasn't that good that year, the defense sold on the game.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the next time Dak's in the playoffs, he beats Seattle off of a crazy play that we praise Josh Allen to use his legs to finish and win games. Dak did that against Seattle. Then you have the Los Angeles Rams games to where the defense gives up 300 yards to where Dak didn't have, an all-world game, but he didn't have a bad game either. He played pretty well, but wasn't allowed to get the ball back to go and get it done because the Rams run shot over the Cowboys defense. I'll give you the 49ers in 2020, but even in 2019, that's a game that I look at and be like, Dak made so many plays in that game that his team sold on, whether because they dropped it or it was because of penalties. Like 2020, you put it on Dak. Or 2021, you put it on Dak. 2020. So is Dak able to beat teams by himself? No. But Patrick Mahomes didn't this year either. He needed that defense to go get it done. He needed his coach to prepare his team.
What Kansas City's defense was what the Cowboys' defense was supposed to be.
Very good point. Yeah, absolutely.
That's how they were hyped up. That's why I'm so down on Micah and that defense. You were supposed to be what Kansas City was. And I think, and again, I've been hard on Dak. I agree with you on his playoff history. I think you can look at San Francisco and be like, bro, that was a time you needed to get it done. That was a time.
For sure. Absolutely.
But
no one's running from that.
But where I will come into Dak Prescott's defense is this year. Because here's the thing. You, me, and Savage, we talked about it. We texted about it. Depending on how the game went, and we probably need to go and pull those texts and figure out what exactly was said. Because we did bring up this scenario. If the defense didn't show up.
On the show, you did.
What are we going to say? And I think we can look back and figure out what was said. We said we weren't going to blame Dak for that if the defense didn't show up. Now, does that change because how Dak played in the first half? Maybe. Maybe that does. But there was momentum starting to happen in the beginning of the second half. Dak goes and scores, and then in 5 plays, Green Bay goes and scores. Is that Dak's fault? That in 5 plays after he just gave you 2 scores, one before the half and right out of halftime, and in 5 plays, you just give that momentum back. That's my only thing about Dak Prescott last year and this team last year.
Yeah.
I understand the past. I understand the 49ers thing, but I'm talking about this year. That gives you back-to-back scores. The defense in 5 plays gets up to score, and the game is pretty much done at that point. Did I think we were going to win that game? Maybe not, but I thought
especially after that drive, that 5-play drive that went for a touchdown. Yeah, I was like, it's over.
After that, I was like, okay, they're just not going to play defense at all today. They're just not going to. But up until then, I thought if they can get a stop, they can get a score. If they get another stop, we're back in it. Like all you needed was 2 stops after that. You needed 2 stops. And I don't think I'm asking too much for a top 5 defense. 2 stops? Against a team that Savage said wouldn't score 20 points? I don't think that's too much to ask for 2 stops. But
no, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. You're preaching to the choir here. You are. Like, again, I'm not excusing the performance that Dak had in the first half against Green Bay.
Yeah.
I mean, but let's not pretend like he was the only one sticking up the joint in that game. I mean, everybody did not show up to play. That was a poorly coached team.
Dak's QBR was like below 50. Like it was like 50 or 40 something. But I'm removed so much from my Dak hate that I can look at the entirety of the game. Apparently the Messiah for you and Savage is Nick Wright. And even he said yesterday on First Things First, your problem wasn't the offense. That's what he said yesterday. The problem wasn't the offense. It was that defense. You were built for speed, not for strength or whatever.
Physicality, probably.
Yeah. If that's not more clear to the people who love Nick Wright, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's going to do it for us here on Double Take, an NFL podcast. Thank you so much for joining us as we rant. We get all these things off of our chest.
We'll be way more
how we feel.
We'll be way more tightened up next time.
Yeah, next week we'll be more tightened up. But thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the next couple of days of free agency. We'll be back next week with a fun episode for you. Aaron Rodgers, his legacy. What does it look like? We'll talk about that next week. But until next time, God bless.